But when a more contested disqualification happened, like a more opinionated one, that got a lot more attention from the mapping community and was the ones we were more concerned about.
What's an example of one of those more dramatic ones?
I don't remember. Yeah, unfortunately, there's just too many maps. They all blend together.
If you don't have anything in mind, I'll look something up, so that'll be fine. Hello there, so while looking that up, I was led to think a lot about disqualifications. Over the quality assurance team's 4.5 years of running thus far, there's been a number of changes to how disqualifications worked, so I decided to expand what I was looking at. I gathered info on DQs during 5 different month-long periods, focusing on 3 main things: how many disqualifications there were relative to maps being ranked, what types of issues were focused on by the QAT, and how the QAT presented themselves to the public through their disqualification posts. So, let's talk about the results. September 2014, the first full month of the QAT's lifespan after being created a week earlier in August. This was when the quality assurance team began making its impressions on the mapping community and, in the process, led people to despise disqualifications. In a month with 128 maps ranked, there were 28 disqualifications. While it's not correct to say this because of all the details on screen, I'm going to say that in this month, about 22% of maps were taken down at least once before passing fully through to the ranked section, and through those disqualifications, it became clear what the initial QAT found concerning in maps. DQ reasons were separated into 2 categories from what I could tell. First was blatant ranking criteria violations, like a difficulty missing a video or a map with glitched green lines. The second category was, I guess I'd call it, unwritten ranking criteria violations. The QAT had some strong views on spinner recovery time on low difficulties, what defines a map set spread, and acceptable combo colors, which weren't immediately clear from the ranking criteria, because they just weren't there. Ranking criteria proposals were made clarifying these issues, and the community was able to get a clearer view on what the QAT was looking for. Giving the public a clear view on QAT ideals was also a big part of the disqualification post formats at the time. Most DQs were simple, fix this please kind of stuff, but a lot also included additional mods from the disqualifier, which I think was a good thing. I was somewhat new to mapping at the time, and seeing these fancy disqualification posts and their attached mods helped me understand what was considered important by the big name modders at the time, and that made their way into my maps. There was also a third, rare type of disqualification format I noticed though, a template-style post that took all the personality away from the QAT. It was headed with a big paragraph on how the map was determined not ready for rank, which I guess didn't sit well with people because so many on map threads felt insulted. Anyway, what's worth noting here is that the DQ reasons I don't see in this month tell me more than those I do see. During September 2014, issues related to subjective mapping quality were actually non-existent. Like, there's not one disqualification here of that. It seemed like the QAT was just some people weeding out mistakes, which turned out to be the exact opposite of how disqualifications were handled less than a year later. July 2015. The QAT by this time had gained its reputation as the evildoers on Osu, taking away high PP scores from everyone playing qualified maps at the time. PP aside though, the quality assurance team's face to the public had morphed into something near unrecognizable from that first month. There were 60 disqualifications in a month with 137 ranked maps total, about a 44% what I'm calling DQ rate, though maybe closer to the high 30s if you consider some maps got disqualified twice. Unlike in the past when the QAT was presented as individuals, the QAT performed disqualifications here became a catch-all generic user representing the whole team, known as the QAT bot. By disqualifying under a mask, individuals were no longer attacked for ruining PP scores, which was good, but it also meant disqualifications could be more harshly enforced, and that didn't turn out so well. Out of the 60 disqualifications this month, 30 were template fix-this style things, 7 were requested disqualifications, which were only available in the first 12 hours for whatever reason, and the last 23 DQs were some of the most unhelpful ones I've ever seen. Templates with examples that expected mappers to figure things out themselves. They were legitimately like, please improve the quality of your map, followed by a few bullet points, and I'm not really sure what people were supposed to get out of it. And in a way, that seemed like it was kind of intentional. DQs were supposed to represent an automated feature rather than a mapping discussion. The template's footer included a disqualification reason tag, sorting DQs by category like M for mapping issues or A for a different issue. I don't really know what they stood for. And the footer included a contest this disqualification form, which would notify the QAT of when a mapper thought a map was wrongly taken down. I think this may have backfired though, since anytime there was a DQ for subjective mapping issues, someone would contest it and nothing would happen. It felt like a false hope that only made people frustrated, though it was working as intended because the one time the contested disqualification passed was when a DQ was actually incorrect. Also, unlike in any other point in history, some maps were fully prevented from ranking at this time. 8 of the 60 disqualifications were on maps that are currently rotting in the graveyard, which likely would have been ranked under looser quality control. So the quality assurance team at this time was probably at its lowest in terms of public reception. Much of that was due to the controversial reasons behind DQs, but I also think it was caused by presentation. Being faceless just meant hating on the QAT was that much easier for the average mapper, and their unintentionally condescending template with its misleading contest this DQ form made it even worse. And I think you know the story from here. The QAT bot went a little overboard with unjust disqualifications, and the team was told to lay back a bit. That being, I decided to investigate September 2015 next, just 2 months later, to see how these internal changes affected the outward appearance of disqualifications. And I think I chose the best possible month here because my preconceptions about what went on were actually wrong. I expected an extremely low DQ rate, but was surprised to see that it was actually higher than that same month a year ago. In September 2015, 38 maps were disqualified while 144 were ranked, a 26% DQ rate, but that isn't a fair way of putting it. Up through the 26th of the month, there were only 14 DQs for mainly ranking criteria violations presented in this formal template. Then, in the month's remaining 4 days, there were 24 DQs, mainly for vague quality reasons, but handled like normal mods instead of disqualifications. It was almost like the QAT was trying to meet a monthly DQ quota, but I know that wasn't the case. I contacted someone who was in the QAT at the time and learned that this activity spike was caused by an angry wake-up call that everyone on the team received. As you might have guessed, people in the QAT were pretty depressed about their whole system being destroyed, so they dropped an activity until being told to do something. While telling people to increase their activity isn't anything new, this scenario was practically foreshadowing all of the QAT going forward. Nobody truly wanted to enforce quality like in the past, or if they did, they weren't really allowed. While these mass disqualifications at the end of September were full of subjective reasons, that didn't really last long. November 2017. I decided to do a 2-year skip here because I think this period represents the least quality assurance-like period of the QAT. 147 maps were ranked, while 23 were disqualified, making for a 16% DQ rate. Unlike every DQ in the past, these DQs were not even formatted like mods. Most were responses to reports in the Report a Qualified Beatmap thread, and so there was no traditional quality assurance being done. Except, of course, in the metadata department. Of the 23 disqualifications, 16 were due to metadata or irrelevant requested DQs, making for only 6 DQs for ranking criteria violations and 1 for subjective concerns. That'd be like a 5% DQ rate. These stats make the quality of ranked maps sound bad, but since the start of the QAT, this is the kind of quality control that the mapping community has been most receptive of. Aside from the 1 subjective disqualification, there were no negative reactions to the quality assurance team's disqualifications. That's something I couldn't possibly say about any other period so far. This, democratic do-what-the-people-want mentality is what the removal of the QAT bot was for, and is what's guided the QAT's disqualification activities up through now. But now has much different results than one would expect. November 2018. A year later, with a lot of changes. 244 maps were ranked, which is noticeably more than other periods, with 134 DQs, making for a rate of 55%. You'd think with so many more DQs that people are beyond sick of them, but it's actually the opposite. There are more DQs now because people are accepting of them. But attributing it to only that would be silly. A lot of beatmap nominators are now involved in doing exactly what the QAT did, checking every qualified map for issues, so there's a lot more maps being reported nowadays. Also, disqualifications no longer reset the amount of time a map has been qualified. Instead of waiting 7 days after each requalification, a map only needs to wait 7 days in total, regardless of when it was taken down, and that makes mappers more willing to do so. These, forming the public's changed views, are why we can have such high DQ counts without the negativity that used to surround disqualifications. DQs now are mainly done with the mapper's consent, making for a happy mapping community. If only that were true. While people are okay with disqualifications now, there's a lot of dissatisfaction with the QAT still. People are longing for more strict quality control, including both people who didn't experience those older periods of strictness and, surprisingly, those who did. Plus, there's currently ongoing efforts to entirely revamp how the quality assurance team will function. It's like these guys can never get a break. But anyway, this is kind of off topic. What conclusions can be made here from looking into disqualifications from different time periods? First, appearance is relevant. People react differently to the QAT's different types of expression, and what people prefer most is being treated casually like people, rather than being discardable content generators. Second, not all disqualification actions of the QAT are immediately apparent. Some watershed moments are obvious, like the removal of the QAT bot leading to less disqualifications, but others might be managed internally without public knowledge, leading to weird anomalies in activity like those seen at the end of September 2015. And third, I think it goes without saying, but beatmap quality assurance is a touchy subject on OSU, and it's seen most clearly through the presentation and reactions to disqualifications. Nothing the QAT does will be seen as the right choice, and because of their desire not to return to the old ways of forcing opinionated standards, there's an air of dissatisfaction that, even if addressed, likely won't truly go away. But hey, that could easily be wrong. Proposed changes involve completely overhauling the QAT into something new, and maybe that'll put everything in a new light. We'll see soon enough, and we'll talk about all that once it's cooked and ready. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week. Or maybe a few days later. I've got like 7 interview videos in progress, and I can't really rush others to meet my deadlines, It doesn't really work that way.